During dinner, my son-in-law laughed. "What's it like to be irrelevant?" Everyone chuckled except me. I just smiled and asked, "How does it feel to know that this irrelevant man will no longer be financing your delusions?" The moment those words left my mouth, my son-in-law's face drained of color and our family dinner transformed into a battlefield. You won't believe what happened next. Before we dive deeper into this story, please hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything to this channel. The crystal chandelier cast warm light across the mahogany dining table, the same table I'd helped my daughter Rebecca select from that upscale furniture store in Denver last spring. The invoice, $4,200, had quietly disappeared into my monthly family assistance budget, just like countless other expenses over the past decade and a half. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. My son-in-law Brandon had just been promoted to senior account executive at Morrison Associates, a mid-tier marketing firm downtown. Rebecca had outdone herself preparing his favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon, roasted asparagus, and those expensive fingerling potatoes from Whole Foods. The wine, a $180 bottle of Caymus Cabernet that I'd brought as a congratulatory gift, sparkled ruby red in the candlelight. "You know, Walter," Brandon said, swirling the wine in his glass with practiced sophistication, "retirement must be peaceful. No deadlines breathing down your neck, no real pressure to perform, no need to actually contribute anything meaningful to society." I carefully set down my fork, watching the salmon grow cold on my plate. Around me, the dining room felt suffocating despite its spacious layout. The room we'd renovated 3 years ago, when Rebecca decided the original was too dated for their lifestyle. Another $23,000 that had somehow become my responsibility. "It has its rewards," I replied evenly, noting how Brandon had positioned himself at the head of the table, my late wife Helen's traditional spot during family gatherings. Even in death, she'd maintained more respect in this house than I apparently commanded while living. Brandon leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. The same chair from the dining set I'd purchased when they'd gotten married 12 years ago. "Don't misunderstand me. I respect what you accomplished back in the day. Engineering bridges and highways. That was solid work. But let's be honest, when was the last time you actually built something, created value, made a real impact?" My granddaughter Sophia, barely 8 years old, looked up from her untouched vegetables. "Grandpa built me a dollhouse last month. It has electricity and everything." "That's sweet, princess." Brandon patted her head with patronizing affection. "But Grandpa needs to understand that real men support their families through actual careers, not by playing with toys in retirement." The silence that followed felt dense enough to cut. Rebecca's nervous laughter tinkled through the tension like breaking glass. "Maybe we should talk about something else? Sophia, tell Grandpa about your gymnastics meet next week." But Brandon wasn't finished. The promotion had inflated his ego like helium in a balloon, and 3 glasses of my expensive wine had loosened his tongue beyond any semblance of propriety. "Actually, I've been thinking," he continued, gesturing broadly with his wine glass. "Now that I'm pulling down serious money, we're talking low 6 figures, Walter. Maybe it's time everyone in this family started carrying their own weight." I knew exactly where this was heading. 15 years of mortgage assistance, private school tuitions, car loans, medical expenses, vacation funds, emergency repairs, and spontaneous investments in their ever-expanding lifestyle. 15 years of watching Brandon spend money like a drunk sailor while I quietly covered the shortfalls that made their middle-class facade possible. Take Rebecca, for instance. He gestured toward my daughter with wine-loosened confidence. She's been out of the workforce for 8 years now? Living off what we could generously call family charity. Maybe it's time she rejoined the productive members of society. Rebecca's face paled to match the bone china we were eating from, another gift I'd purchased for their 5th anniversary. She understood, as I did, that their entire lifestyle existed only because of my silent financial foundation. The private gymnastics coaching for Sophia, the violin lessons for my grandson Jake, the lease on Brandon's Audi A6, the kitchen renovation completed just 6 months ago. all impossible without my consistent support. Jake, my 10-year-old grandson, sensed the mounting tension with the intuitive radar children possess. "Are we in trouble, Dad?" "No, son. But it's important you understand the difference between earners and—" Brandon's eyes found mine across the table, those who've simply given up trying. The insult landed like a physical blow. Rebecca's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. The children exchanged worried glances, their innocent faces reflecting confusion at the sudden shift in adult dynamics. Brandon leaned forward, emboldened by what he interpreted as my silence. "I don't mean to be harsh, Walter, but someone needs to address the elephant in the room. When was the last time you contributed something meaningful to this family? When did you last experience the satisfaction of earning your own way instead of just existing?" He paused dramatically, savoring what he believed was his moment of alpha dominance. The candlelight flickered across his face, highlighting features that had grown softer and more entitled over the years of easy living my money had provided. "Seriously, Walter," his voice dropped to a mock sympathetic tone. "What's it like to be completely irrelevant?" The question hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Rebecca gasped audibly. Jake's fork clattered against his plate. Sophia started to sniffle, sensing something terrible was happening even if she couldn't understand the adult cruelty unfolding around her. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I took a deliberate sip of water, set the glass down with engineer precision, and looked Brandon directly in the eyes. "How does it feel?" I said, my voice steady as bedrock. "To know that this irrelevant man will no longer be financing your delusions?" The color drained from Brandon's face faster than wine from a broken bottle. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth, her bracelet, last year's Christmas gift from me, catching the candlelight. The children stared in bewildered silence as their father's triumphant expression crumbled into something approaching terror. I continued eating my dinner with mechanical precision, cutting each piece of salmon with the same methodical care I'd once applied to engineering specifications, while the table remained frozen in stunned silence. Outside, the first autumn rain began pattering against the dining room windows, and somewhere in the distance, a neighbor's dog started barking, perhaps sensing the seismic shift occurring in our suburban neighborhood. After what felt like an eternity, I wiped my mouth with the linen napkin, stood slowly, and kissed both Sophia and Jake goodbye. "Thank you for dinner, Rebecca. The salmon was perfectly prepared." I walked to the front door, retrieved my coat from the hall closet, and stepped into the cool September evening, leaving behind a table full of people who were finally beginning to understand what 15 years of quiet generosity had actually cost. The 20-minute drive home passed in surreal silence. My hands remained steady on the steering wheel despite the emotional earthquake rumbling through my chest. I pulled into the driveway of my modest colonial, the house Helen and I had bought 43 years ago, the one we'd planned to upgrade once I retired, before cancer stole her and family obligations consumed my dreams. Inside, I hung my coat in the hall closet and walked directly to my study. The room still smelled of Helen's favorite lavender candles, though I hadn't lit one since her funeral in late 2008. I switched on the brass desk lamp, a retirement gift from my engineering firm, and its warm glow illuminated what would become the most important investigation of my life. As a structural engineer, I'd learned that the devil lived in the details. Every calculation mattered. Every measurement told a story. For 15 years, I'd maintained meticulous financial records, filing every receipt, bank statement, and canceled check with the same precision I'd once applied to building blueprints. Time to see exactly what my irrelevance had cost me. I opened the first filing cabinet, labeled Family Financial Assistance 2009-2012. The folders were color-coded, blue for mortgage payments, green for automotive expenses, yellow for educational costs, red for medical bills, purple for home improvements, and orange for miscellaneous support. Helen had died in December 2008, just as the financial crisis reached its peak. By February 2009, Rebecca was already drowning. Brandon's entry-level marketing position couldn't support their $2,400 monthly mortgage, and layoffs were sweeping through Denver's business community like wildfire. I spread the first year's statements across my mahogany desk, the same desk where I'd once drafted structural plans for hospitals and schools that still stood throughout Colorado. February 2009, $2,400 mortgage assistance. March 2009, $2,400 mortgage assistance. April 2009, $2,400 mortgage assistance. Month after month, the numbers marched across my desk like soldiers in formation. $2,400 became $2,600 when property taxes increased. $2,600 became $2,875 when they refinanced for a lower interest rate but somehow ended up with higher payments. My calculator showed $516,000 in mortgage assistance over 180 months. More than $500,000 just to keep their roof intact. But that was only the beginning. The automotive folder revealed another story entirely. Brandon's college Honda had died in 2010, replaced by a reliable family vehicle. A $40,000 Audi A6 with a $580 monthly lease payment. Rebecca's minivan, purchased when Sophia was born, carried a $420 monthly loan. $1,000 monthly in vehicle expenses for 12 years, $144,000. The educational expenses made my breath catch. Private school tuition for both children. Sophia at Denver Academy from kindergarten through 2nd grade, Jake from preschool through 4th grade. $26,000 annually in tuition alone, plus uniforms, supplies, field trips, after-school programs, summer camps, sports equipment, music lessons, and enrichment activities. I tallied 9 years of educational investment, $234,000. Medical insurance premiums during Brandon's 3 periods of unemployment filled another folder. Dental work, orthodontics, therapy sessions, emergency room visits, prescription medications, all the healthcare expenses that accumulated when living paycheck to paycheck. $12,000 annually for 15 years. $180,000. The miscellaneous folder contained hundreds of smaller receipts that told the story of a lifestyle maintained through constant subsidization. Disney World vacations, ski weekends in Vail, Christmas presents that exceeded their annual income, car repairs, home maintenance, emergency appliances, wedding gifts for friends, birthday parties that rivaled corporate events. Another $75,000 in lifestyle support. The final tally made me lean back in my leather chair and stare at the ceiling where Helen and I had once planned to install crown molding. Another dream deferred for family obligations. $149,000. Over $1 million. 15 years of my retirement security. Invested in a family that had just asked me what it felt like to be irrelevant. I pulled out my personal financial statements, the ones showing what I'd sacrificed to provide that $1 million foundation. The European vacation Helen and I had planned but never took, because Rebecca needed help with Jake's preschool tuition. The lake house we'd considered buying, but abandoned when Brandon lost his job in 2011. The classic car restoration project I'd dreamed of. The woodworking shop I'd wanted to build. The photography classes I'd postponed year after year. I'd spent 15 years funding their American dream while abandoning my own. At 11:30 p.m., I opened my laptop and began documenting every automatic payment, every direct transfer, every financial commitment that had become as routine as breathing. Tomorrow would bring a series of very interesting phone calls to customer service departments across the Denver metro area. Outside my study window, the neighborhood had settled into sleep. But inside, under the warm glow of my desk lamp, I was wide awake and calculating the true cost of being taken for granted. The engineering part of my brain began formulating a plan with the same methodical precision I'd once applied to load-bearing calculations. Every structure had a foundation. Remove the foundation, and even the most impressive building would reveal its true stability. Time to conduct a stress test on Brandon's carefully constructed lifestyle. Sunday morning coffee tasted different, stronger somehow. I sat at my kitchen table watching cardinals fight over seeds at the feeder Helen had installed years ago, then returned to my study where neat stacks of financial documents waited like ammunition for the day's campaign. First National Bank of Colorado answered on the second ring. Customer service, this is Jessica. How may I assist you today? I need to cancel several automatic payments from checking account 778945219876. My voice carried the same measured tone I'd used for 4 decades of client presentations, steady and uncompromising. Certainly, sir. May I have the last 4 digits of your social security number for verification? The process took 14 minutes. Jessica was thorough, professional, and completely unaware she was dismantling 15 years of financial architecture with each keystroke. Those automatic transfers are now discontinued, Mr. Patterson. Is there anything else I can help you with today? That's everything, thank you. Checkmark next to mortgage assistance, $2,075 monthly. Colorado Mountain Credit Union required a supervisor for the automotive payments. The Audi lease cancellation needed 3 different departments and a 20-minute hold period filled with jazz music. Each call followed the same pattern: polite verification, efficient processing, confirmation numbers that I dutifully recorded in my notebook with engineering precision. By 11 a.m., I'd crossed off 7 items from my list. Denver Academy's billing department was surprisingly accommodating. Mr. Patterson, we show automatic tuition payments from your account for both Sophia and Jake Patterson. You'd like to discontinue these? Effective immediately. I understand. Their parents will need to arrange alternative payment methods for the October installment. The amount due is $4,800 for both children. I'm sure they'll manage. By noon, I'd systematically canceled every automatic payment that had connected my checking account to their lifestyle. The confirmation numbers filled 2 pages of my notebook. Mortgage assistance, car payments, insurance premiums, school tuition, medical coverage, utilities backup, credit card automatic payments, and emergency overdraft protection. The phone rang at 12:47 p.m. Dad? Rebecca's voice carried confusion rather than panic. Not yet. Something strange happened with our mortgage payment. First National called saying there were insufficient funds, but that doesn't make sense because you assumed I'd keep paying forever. The silence stretched between us like a suspension cable under stress. What do you mean? Her voice climbed half an octave. Exactly what I said last night. I'm no longer subsidizing your lifestyle. But Dad, you can't just... The mortgage, the school payments, Jake's orthodontist appointment on Tuesday. All discontinued as of this morning. I could hear her breathing quicken, the sound of someone realizing the ground beneath their feet was shifting. This isn't funny, Dad. We'll lose the house. Then you'll need to figure out how to pay for it yourselves. The line went dead. My notebook showed 4 more institutions to contact. Mountain View Insurance was efficient. Denver Academy's supplemental programs asked fewer questions than I'd expected. Each confirmation number went into my log with mechanical precision. Rebecca called back at 1:23 p.m., her voice now tight with genuine fear. Dad, please. I don't understand what's happening. The insurance company called. The school's business office. Even the electric company said our backup payment method was declined. Your backup payment method? Your account, she whispered. We've had your checking account as our backup payment source for years now. Did you think these payments materialized from thin air, Rebecca? Another devastating silence. But we never asked you to. You never asked because you never had to. I simply handled it, quietly, for 15 years. We can't afford... She stopped herself mid-sentence, finally confronting the mathematical reality she'd been avoiding for over a decade. Yes, I said gently. That's exactly the point. At 1:45 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, Brandon's voice came through with forced corporate authority. Walter, whatever passive-aggressive game you're playing needs to stop immediately. No game, Brandon, just reality. You can't sabotage our family because your feelings got hurt at dinner. I'm not sabotaging anything, I'm simply ending my financial support. Your support? His voice cracked slightly. We never asked for charity. You never asked for anything directly. You just expected it. For 15 years. His silence lasted longer than Rebecca's had. The final call on my list was to my financial advisor, Robert Chen, who'd been managing my retirement accounts since Helen's death. "Walter, good to hear from you. What can I do?" "I need to discuss redirecting some monthly expenditures. Starting in October, I'll have an additional $6,200 monthly to invest." "That's substantial. New income source?" "Discontinued expenses. 15 years of family support that's no longer needed." Robert's pause was thoughtful. "I see. Well, at 72, you have some interesting options. Have you considered that European river cruise you mentioned last year?" Outside my study window, the cardinals had found a comfortable arrangement at the feeder. Autumn sunlight filtered through the maple tree Helen and I had planted for our 20th anniversary. For the first time in 15 years, I began planning my own future instead of funding someone else's. Monday morning arrived with crystalline October air and the kind of silence that follows destruction. I was halfway through my morning coffee when the familiar sound of Brandon's Audi pulling into my driveway shattered the peace. Through my kitchen window, I watched him emerge from the driver's seat with the jerky movements of a man operating on pure adrenaline and desperation. Rebecca climbed out of the passenger side, clutching her purse like a shield against incoming artillery. They marched up my front walkway with the determined stride of people who'd spent the night convincing themselves they held the moral high ground. I opened the door before they could assault my doorbell. "We need to talk." Brandon pushed past me without invitation, Rebecca trailing behind with red-rimmed eyes that suggested very little sleep. "Please, come in," I said to their backs as they commandeered my living room. Brandon positioned himself in the center of the room like a general claiming territory. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his tie slightly askew, the first cracks in his corporate armor. "This vindictive tantrum of yours ends right now. You will call those banks immediately and restore every single payment." "No, I won't." His face flushed crimson. "You can't just abandon us without warning. There are legal obligations here, verbal contracts, implied agreements. Show me the contract where I agreed to pay your bills forever." Rebecca stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Dad, please think about what Mom would want. Remember what you promised at her funeral?" The mention of Helen hit like a physical blow, but I'd spent Sunday night preparing for this exact manipulation. "I promised to help you get stable, Rebecca. 15 years and over $1 million later, you're less stable than when we started." "$1 million?" Rebecca's whisper barely carried across the room. "That's impossible." I walked to my desk and retrieved my calculator and the summary notebook I'd prepared. $1,149,000 to be precise. Mortgage assistance, car payments, insurance premiums, school tuition, medical bills, home improvements, vacations, emergencies, Christmas gifts, and miscellaneous lifestyle support. Would you like me to break it down by category? Brandon's bluster faltered for exactly 4 seconds before corporate training kicked back in. "That's impossible. We never asked for that much." "You never asked for anything directly. You simply expected it, month after month, year after year." Rebecca sank onto my couch, her face pale as morning frost. "But the children, Jake's orthodontics, Sophia's gymnastics. How will we?" "I'll continue paying for the children's legitimate needs directly. No more money flowing through you and Brandon to be absorbed into your lifestyle." "You can't divide the family like that," Brandon snapped. "We're a unit. A team. Teams require mutual respect. When did either of you last thank me for anything?" The question hung in the October air like smoke from a chimney. Rebecca's tears started slowly, then built to the desperate sobs I remembered from her teenage heartbreaks. But this wasn't adolescent drama. This was adult consequence meeting adult choices. "I didn't know it was so much," she whispered through her tears. I thought you wanted to help. I thought it made you happy." "It did, until you stopped appreciating it and started demanding it." Brandon began pacing my carpet like a caged predator. "Fine. You want gratitude? Thank you. There, now restore the payments." "Gratitude doesn't work retroactively, Brandon." His pacing stopped abruptly. For the first time since entering my house, he looked genuinely worried rather than merely angry. What exactly do you want from us? I want you to learn how to live within your actual means. I want my grandchildren to see their parents working for what they have instead of expecting handouts. I want to be treated like a father and grandfather, not an ATM with legs. Rebecca looked up through her tears, mascara streaking down her cheeks. What if we can't manage? What if we lose everything? Then you'll discover what failure actually feels like, instead of just calling other people failures. The silence stretched until even the autumn shadows seemed to hold their breath. Brandon straightened his shoulders, retrieving some fragment of his corporate composure. We'll see about this. There are attorneys who specialize in elder financial abuse cases. I almost smiled. Please call them. I'd love to explain how I've been financially abused for 15 years. They left without another word, Brandon's Audi roaring to life with more aggression than the German engineering probably appreciated. I stood at my window watching them disappear down Maple Street and realized my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the exhilarating terror of free fall. The phone rang 30 minutes later. Rebecca's sister Jennifer calling from Phoenix. Dad, Rebecca called me crying. She says you've cut them off without warning and they're going to lose the house. What's really going on? What did she tell you about the past 15 years? That you've been helpful with some expenses, but now you're being vindictive over some dinner conversation. Some helpful with some expenses, I repeated slowly. Jennifer, I've given them over $1 million since your mother died. Mortgage payments, car loans, private school tuition, insurance, medical bills, vacations, home improvements, everything that's made their middle-class lifestyle possible. The silence from Phoenix lasted nearly 30 seconds. $1 million? $149,000 in documented expenses. I have receipts for every penny. Rebecca never mentioned, she talked about you helping occasionally, but ask her to show you their bank statements, Jennifer. Ask her to explain how they've afforded private school on Brandon's salary. Ask her how they managed a $40,000 car lease and a $2,175 monthly mortgage payment. Another long pause. Dad, are you sure about this? It seems so extreme. 15 years of supporting their lifestyle while being called irrelevant, and a failure seems pretty extreme to me too. That evening, as darkness settled over suburban Denver, I sat in Helen's favorite chair and opened the travel brochures I'd been collecting for a decade. Scotland, Ireland, the Norwegian fjords, Portugal's wine country. For the first time since Helen's funeral, I began planning adventures instead of interventions. Tuesday morning brought the first bank notifications like distant thunder before a storm. Colorado Mountain Credit Union called at 8:15 a.m. about Brandon's returned Audi payment. The mortgage company left 2 voicemails before noon. Denver Academy's bursar office wanted to discuss alternative payment arrangements for the children's October tuition. I let every call go to voicemail, then played them back over lunch, taking notes with the methodical precision of an engineer documenting structural failure. Wednesday afternoon, I drove past Rebecca's house during school pickup time. Jake and Sophia stood with other children whose tuition payments had cleared, but I noticed Rebecca's minivan wasn't in the usual pickup line. Instead, Brandon's Audi sat at the curb, engine running, exhaust visible in the cool afternoon air. Through my rearview mirror, I watched him check his phone repeatedly, his body language tense even from a distance. The Audi's lease payment was $580 monthly. Without my automatic coverage, their checking account couldn't handle both the mortgage and transportation. That evening, my neighbor Dorothy Peterson mentioned hearing raised voices from Rebecca's house during her evening walk. Sounded like financial troubles, she said sadly. The young man was shouting something about maxed-out credit cards and impossible mathematics. Thursday brought escalation. Rebecca called at 7:23 a.m., her voice hoarse from crying. Dad, please. I've been awake all night trying to make the numbers work. Brandon's salary is $6,200 monthly after taxes. The mortgage alone is $2,875. That leaves $3,325 for everything else. For the first time in 15 years, she was doing mathematics on her own survival. The car payments together are $1,000 monthly, insurance is $300, utilities average $250, groceries for 4 people run about $800. That's already $350, leaving us $975 for everything else. I remained silent, letting her confront reality without interference. Jake needs new school shoes. Sophia's gymnastics is $180 monthly. Gas for both cars is at least $200. We haven't even talked about clothes, medical copays, phone bills, or any emergency expenses. Her voice cracked completely. Dad, we can't survive on what we actually earn. No, I said quietly. You can't survive on what you've been spending. But we'll lose everything. The house, the cars, the kids' schools. Then you'll need to make different choices. The line went dead. Friday afternoon brought visual confirmation of their new reality. Brandon's Audi was gone from their driveway, replaced by a 10-year-old Honda Accord with visible rust spots on the rear fender. According to Dorothy, who possessed the neighborhood intelligence network, Rebecca had been spotted at the Honda dealership Thursday evening, filling out paperwork while Brandon sat in the passenger seat, looking utterly defeated. The monthly savings would be significant, $580 eliminated from their budget, but the psychological impact of downgrading from luxury to reliability would cut deeper than mere mathematics. Saturday morning, I stopped by Safeway and saw Rebecca behind checkout register number 4. She wore a blue vest with a name tag, scanning items with mechanical efficiency while avoiding eye contact with customers she'd known for years. When Mrs. Hamilton approached her lane, Rebecca's face flushed crimson. Rebecca, dear, I didn't know you were working here. Started Monday, Rebecca replied, not meeting her eyes. Paper or plastic? Her shift ended at 2:00 p.m. I watched through the storefront window as she walked to the rusted Honda, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion and humiliation. 8 hours on her feet for $12 an hour, minus taxes, maybe $350 weekly if she could maintain full-time hours. The mathematics were still impossible, but at least now she was confronting them honestly. That evening, Jake called me, his voice small and worried. Grandpa, Mom and Dad are fighting again. Really loud this time. About what, buddy? Money. Dad said Mom's job doesn't pay enough to matter. Mom said Dad never made enough either. Then they said mean things about you. What kind of mean things? That you were being mean and selfish. But then Mom started crying and said maybe she was mean and selfish for never saying thank you, out of the mouths of babes. Sunday morning I was reading the Denver Post when my doorbell rang. Brandon stood on my porch alone, his corporate confidence completely absent. His usual pressed shirt was wrinkled, his tie missing, his face showing exhaustion I'd never witnessed before. Walter, I need to talk to you. Just the two of us, man to man. I invited him into my living room, the same room where he'd demanded I restore payments just 5 days earlier. He sat heavily in Helen's favorite chair, his hands clasped tightly between his knees. The numbers don't work, he said without preamble. Rebecca's making $1,300 monthly after taxes if she can keep full-time hours. I'm bringing home $6,200. The mortgage alone eats up 46% of our combined income. He looked up at me for the first time since entering my house. We can't make it work, not even close. We never could we? Without your help, I mean. No, I said quietly. You never could. I've been thinking about something you said, about earning respect versus expecting it. His voice cracked slightly. I never earned anything, did I? The house, the cars, the kids' private schools, the vacations, the lifestyle. None of it was really mine. Outside, church bells were ringing somewhere in the distance, calling people to worship and reflection. What do you want from me, Brandon? I want to know if there's a way back from this. Not back to how things were, but forward to something honest. For the first time in our 12-year relationship, I saw genuine humility in his eyes instead of entitlement or calculation. The conversation that followed would determine whether this family could be rebuilt on a foundation of truth, or whether the structure would collapse completely under the weight of years of deception. Brandon's question hung in the autumn air between us like morning fog. For 12 years, our relationship had been built on a lie, that his success was self-made, that my contribution was merely supplemental, that their gratitude was genuine, rather than performative. Now, sitting in my living room with his pride in ruins and his lifestyle crumbling, he was asking for something I hadn't heard from him in over a decade: honesty. There might be a way forward, I said carefully, but it would require complete transparency and significant changes from both you and Rebecca. He leaned forward, hands still clasped between his knees. Tell me what you need. First, I want public acknowledgement of what I've provided, not just to me, but to the community that's watched you pretend this lifestyle was earned through your own efforts. Brandon's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Second, I want genuine apologies. Not just words, but changed behavior. No more entitlement. No more assumptions. No more treating me like an obligation instead of a choice. And third, a complete lifestyle adjustment to match your actual income. No more living beyond your means and expecting me to cover the difference. Brandon was quiet for several minutes, staring at his hands. Outside, I could hear children playing in the street, the sound of normal families enjoying normal Sunday afternoons without financial crisis hanging over their heads. What about Jake and Sophia? He asked finally. I'll continue supporting their education, medical needs, and legitimate childhood expenses, but I'll pay those directly to providers, not through you and Rebecca. He looked up sharply. You don't trust us with money anymore. Would you? The question hit its mark. Brandon's face flushed, but he didn't argue. If we do this, if we make these changes and acknowledgments, what happens then? Then we build a relationship based on truth instead of financial dependency. You learn to live within your means. I get to be a grandfather instead of an ATM. The children see their parents working for what they have. Brandon stood and walked to my mantel, studying the wedding photo of Helen and me from 1971. We'd been so young then, so full of dreams and plans for the future. Helen would be disappointed in how this all turned out, wouldn't she? Helen would be disappointed that it took 15 years for you to ask honest questions. He turned back to face me, and for the first time since he'd married my daughter, I saw the man Rebecca had fallen in love with. Humbled, real, scared, but finally genuine. Walter, I owe you more than apologies. I owe you, God, I don't even know where to start. Start with the truth. To Rebecca, to the children, to yourself. Will you consider helping us through this transition? Not financially, but guidance? I honestly don't know how to live within our actual means. We've never had to. For the first time in our conversation, I smiled. Brandon, teaching people how to build solid foundations is what I did for 40 years. I think I can help you learn. He left 20 minutes later, but not before shaking my hand. The first time he'd offered that gesture since their wedding day. Monday morning brought a different kind of phone call. Dad? Rebecca's voice was quiet, subdued. Brandon told me about your conversation yesterday, about the conditions for moving forward. And a long pause. I want to try. The public acknowledgement part scares me, but I think I've been scared of the wrong things for too long. What do you mean? I was scared of people knowing we needed help, but I should have been scared of taking advantage of someone who loved us enough to give it. That afternoon, Rebecca came to my house alone. She looked different without her Safeway vest, smaller, more vulnerable, but also more real than I'd seen her in years. Dad, I need to understand something. The $1 million you mentioned, can you show me how that breaks down? I need to see it to believe it. I led her to my study and opened the filing cabinets. For 2 hours, we went through every folder, every receipt, every bank statement. She held each document like it was evidence in a trial, which in a way it was. The trial of 15 years of willful blindness. This mortgage payment from March 2011, she whispered, holding a bank statement. $2,650. I remember that month. Brandon had just gotten a raise and we celebrated at that expensive steakhouse downtown. The same night you called to ask if I could help with Jake's summer camp registration. Her face crumpled. We spent $200 on dinner to celebrate Brandon's success while you paid our mortgage. Receipt after receipt told the same story. Vacation photos posted on social media the same weeks I covered their car insurance. Facebook posts about Brandon's smart financial planning during months when I paid their utility bills. Dad, Rebecca's voice broke completely. We weren't just ungrateful. We were fraudulent. We let people believe Brandon was successful while you made it all possible. I handed her the final calculation sheet. $149,000 over 15 years, an average of $6,377 per month. She stared at the number until tears made the ink blur. What did you sacrifice for us? That question opened a door I'd kept locked for years. I showed her the travel brochures Helen and I had collected: Scotland, Ireland, the Austrian Alps. The brochures were yellowed now, some dating back to 2009. Mom wanted to see the Northern Lights, Rebecca whispered, remembering. We had the trip planned for her 70th birthday. Then she got sick, and after she died, you needed help with the mortgage. I showed her my personal financial statements, the retirement account that should have grown but remained stagnant, the modest house that could have been lakefront property, the 2008 Ford pickup in my garage while Brandon drove luxury vehicles. I gave you 15 years of my dreams, Rebecca, and somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing it as a gift and started seeing it as your right. She sobbed then, the kind of deep, soul-wrenching cries that come from confronting your worst self in a mirror. How do we fix this, Dad? How do we make this right? We start with truth. Complete, public truth. Tuesday morning, Rebecca called the Denver Post's community section. Her voice shook as she spoke with the editor. I'd like to place a letter in the Community Voices section. It's about family, gratitude, and setting the record straight. The letter appeared in Thursday's edition. To our community, for 15 years my family has lived a lie, and it's time for the truth. My father, Walter Patterson, has provided over $1 million in financial support to my family since my mother's death in 2008. He paid our mortgage, car loans, insurance premiums, children's private school tuition, medical bills, and countless other expenses that allowed us to maintain a middle-class lifestyle we could never afford on our own income. Instead of acknowledging his extraordinary generosity, we allowed people to believe our success was self-made. We posted social media photos of vacations he funded while claiming financial independence. We bragged about smart money management while relying entirely on his quiet support. Last week, after years of taking his generosity for granted, we learned what gratitude really means, and what it costs when you lose it. Dad, thank you for 15 years of selfless love. Thank you for sacrificing your own dreams to secure ours. Thank you for every mortgage payment, every tuition check, every emergency that you handled without complaint or recognition. To our community, if you have someone in your life who gives without expectation, don't wait 15 years to say thank you. Don't let pride prevent gratitude. Don't mistake generosity for weakness. We are learning to live within our actual means for the first time in our adult lives. It's humbling, frightening, and long overdue. Sincerely, Rebecca and Brandon Martinez. The letter created immediate ripples throughout our suburban community. Dorothy Peterson called me that afternoon. Walter, I had no idea. All these years I thought Brandon was just very successful. I feel terrible for assuming. Similar calls came throughout the week. People who had admired Brandon's apparent financial acumen, who had asked him for investment advice, who had used him as an example of young professional success. The Facebook post Rebecca published was even more direct. Truth time. Everything you've seen of our lifestyle for the past 15 years was funded by my father's generosity. The house, cars, vacations, kids' private schools, even the clothes we wore to social events. all made possible by a man we treated like an ATM instead of a hero. Dad, you deserved better from us. The whole community deserves to know what real success looks like, and it looks like Walter Patterson's quiet, selfless love for his family. Gratitude. Truth. Better late than never. The post generated 127 comments, most supportive, some questioning why it had taken so long for the truth to emerge. Friday evening, Brandon requested a family meeting at my house. They arrived at 6 p.m. sharp. Rebecca in her Safeway uniform, Brandon in a shirt that showed wear around the collar, Jake and Sophia carrying homemade cards. "Grandpa," Sophia said, climbing onto my lap. "Mommy and Daddy explained about the money. Thank you for taking care of us." Jake, more reserved at 10, approached with his characteristic seriousness. "Grandpa, I'm sorry we didn't say thank you before. I didn't understand, but I do now." Brandon cleared his throat. "Walter, I've made appointments with 3 financial advisors this week to learn how to budget properly. Rebecca and I have also applied for a second mortgage payment assistance program through the county, and we're looking at smaller houses we can actually afford." "The Honda is paid off," Rebecca added. "So that eliminates 1 car payment entirely. I'm working toward shift supervisor at Safeway, which would mean $15 an hour instead of $12. And I've applied to graduate school," Brandon continued. "Part-time MBA program that my company will partially fund. It'll take 3 years, but it should lead to significant salary advancement." I looked around my living room at 4 people who, for the first time in 15 years, were talking about earning instead of expecting. "What about the children's expenses?" "We'd like to propose something," Rebecca said. "Instead of you paying their school and activity costs directly, what if you put that money into education savings accounts for their futures? They can attend public school, participate in community programs, and learn what it means to live within a family budget." Brandon nodded. "We want them to see us working for what we have, not handed what we want." "Are you sure about that? It's a significant lifestyle change for all of you." "Grandpa," Jake spoke up, "my friend Marcus goes to public school and plays baseball in the community league. He says it's really fun and they have good teachers too." Sophia bounced on my lap. "And I can do gymnastics at the recreation center instead of the expensive place. Mommy says it's more important to learn from our mistakes than to pretend they didn't happen." 6 months later, on a bright March morning, I sat in my kitchen reading a letter that had arrived with the morning mail. The return address showed Martinez family, 1247 Elm Street. Their new address after downsizing from the 4-bedroom colonial to a modest 3-bedroom ranch they could actually afford. "Dear Dad, it's been 6 months since our family imploded and rebuilt itself on honesty instead of handouts. I wanted to update you on how we're doing." Brandon finished his first semester of the MBA program with a 3.8 GPA. His company promoted him to account manager, which came with a $800 monthly salary increase. More importantly, he's earning every penny through his own efforts for the first time in our marriage. I made shift supervisor at Safeway, and now earn $16.50 an hour. It's not glamorous, but I come home every day knowing I've earned my paycheck. Yesterday, a coworker complimented my work ethic, and I felt prouder than I ever did about any expensive purchase you funded. Jake and Sophia adjusted to public school better than we expected. Jake made the honor roll and plays on the community center baseball team. Sophia loves her new gymnastics coach and has made wonderful friends from families across all income levels. Last week, we paid our mortgage, utilities, groceries, and car insurance entirely from our own income for the first time ever. We had $127 left over, which we put into our emergency fund. It's a tiny emergency fund, but it's ours. The house is smaller, our cars are older, and our lifestyle is simpler. But it's real, Dad. It's honest. And for the first time in 15 years, we're building something we can actually sustain. Jake asked me yesterday why we seem happier even though we have less stuff. I told him it's because we finally have something worth more than stuff: self-respect. Thank you for loving us enough to cut us off. Thank you for teaching us that sometimes the greatest gift is refusing to give. Love, Rebecca P.S. The kids insist on walking to your house after school on Friday to show you their report cards. Jake wants to tell you about making the honor roll, and Sophia has a gymnastics routine she's choreographed herself. They're both so proud of what they've accomplished through their own efforts. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the file marked Family Correspondence, 2024. The morning sun streamed through my kitchen window, illuminating the travel brochures spread across my table. Scotland in May, Ireland in June, the Norwegian fjords in July. At 73, I was finally planning the adventures Helen and I had dreamed about. The children's education accounts were growing steadily, funded by the money I no longer spent on mortgage payments and car leases. Brandon and Rebecca were building their first genuine budget, learning to distinguish between wants and needs. But more importantly, they were discovering what Helen had tried to teach me years ago, that the best gift you can give someone you love isn't money. It's the opportunity to discover their own strength. My phone rang at 3:30 p.m. Sophia's voice bubbled through the speaker. "Grandpa, I got an A+ on my math test, and the teacher said I could help tutor other kids because I'm so good at explaining fractions." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. What did you do to earn such a good grade?" "I studied every night this week, and Mommy helped me practice with pizza slices to understand the fractions better. We used real pizza, so it was fun and educational." In the background, I could hear Rebecca laughing, the genuine sound of a mother proud of her daughter's earned achievement rather than purchased advantage. "Grandpa," Jake's voice took over the phone. "Mom says we can walk to your house on Friday after school. Is that okay? I want to show you my honor roll certificate. I'll be here waiting. Should I make hot chocolate?" "Yes. And Grandpa, thank you for teaching us how to work hard. It feels really good to earn things." After they hung up, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, Helen's favorite music playing softly on the radio. Outside, spring was beginning to show itself in small green buds on the maple tree we'd planted together decades ago. For 15 years, I'd funded their lifestyle while sacrificing my own dreams. Now, at 73, I was finally free to live the life Helen and I had planned, not as an obligation to others, but as a gift to myself. The phone rang again at 4:15, Brandon this time. "Walter, I hope you don't mind the kids calling you directly. They're so excited about their achievements." "I love hearing from them. How are you adjusting to the new normal?" "It's challenging, but good challenging. I'm learning budgeting skills I should have developed 20 years ago. Rebecca and I actually enjoy our Friday night routine of planning the next week's expenses. Sounds pathetic, but there's something satisfying about making our own money cover our own needs." "That's not pathetic, Brandon. That's adulting." He laughed. "Yeah, better late than never, right? Listen, I wanted to ask you something. The company is offering a financial planning seminar for employees. Would you be willing to speak about long-term budgeting and retirement savings? You'd be compensated, of course, but more importantly, I think people could learn from your experience." For the first time in our relationship, Brandon was asking for my expertise rather than my money. "I'd be honored to help." "And Walter, thank you for everything, but especially for teaching us the difference between supporting and enabling." 1 year later, I stood in my backyard watching Jake and Sophia play with the tire swing I'd hung from the old oak tree. Their laughter carried across the yard as Rebecca and Brandon set up a picnic lunch on the table I'd built from reclaimed wood, a retirement project I'd finally had time to complete. "Dad," Rebecca called out, "the potato salad is perfect. Did you use Mom's recipe?" "With a few modifications. Helen always said recipes were meant to evolve." Brandon was manning the grill, wearing an apron that read, "World's Okayest Cook." A Father's Day gift from the kids, purchased with money they'd earned from yard work and extra chores. His technique had improved significantly since the days when grilling was just another leisure activity I indirectly funded. "Walter, these burgers are about done. Jake, Sophia, come wash your hands." The children ran toward the house, grass-stained and happy. Sophia's gymnastics skills had earned her a spot on the recreation center's competition team, not through expensive private coaching, but through natural talent nurtured by community programs and her own dedication. Jake had made the middle school honor roll 3 consecutive quarters and was saving money from his allowance to buy a used bicycle he'd seen at the local shop. "I want to earn it myself, Grandpa," he'd explained. "It'll mean more that way." As we gathered around the picnic table for lunch, I looked at faces that glowed with earned satisfaction rather than entitled expectation. Rebecca had been promoted to assistant manager at Safeway and was considering taking evening classes in business administration. Brandon had completed his first year of the MBA program while maintaining his new position as senior account manager. Their 3-bedroom ranch house wasn't as spacious as the colonial I'd helped them keep for so many years, but it was truly theirs. The mortgage payments came from their combined income, the utilities were managed within their budget, and every piece of furniture had been chosen with careful consideration of both need and cost. "Grandpa," Sophia said, chewing thoughtfully on her burger, "Mommy says you're going to Scotland next month. Are you excited?" "Very excited. I've wanted to see the Highlands since I was your age." "Will you bring us back something?" "Of course. What would you like?" Jake perked up. "Maybe something educational, like a book about Scottish engineering or architecture?" Rebecca smiled at her son's request. "Jake's been fascinated by bridges ever since you showed him those photos of the structures you designed." "I want to be an engineer like Grandpa when I grow up," Jake announced. "But I want to build things that help people, not just make money." The comment hit me with unexpected emotion. Here was my grandson, at 11 years old, understanding the difference between meaningful work and mere income generation, a lesson it had taken his parents decades to learn. "Engineering is about solving problems and building things that last," I told him. "It's good, honest work." Brandon set down his drink and looked at me directly. "Walter, I've been meaning to ask you something. The financial planning seminar I spoke at last month, 3 people approached me afterward asking for your contact information. They want to hire you as a retirement planning consultant." "I'm not sure I'm ready to go back to work." "Not work," Rebecca interjected. "Sharing wisdom, teaching people what you've learned about building real security versus living beyond their means." I considered this. At 74, I had more energy and clarity than I'd possessed in years. The European trips had been invigorating rather than exhausting. Teaching others to avoid the financial enabling trap that had consumed 15 years of my life might be a worthwhile way to spend my remaining productive years. "I'll think about it," I said. After lunch, while the children played and Rebecca cleaned up the dishes, Brandon approached me as I sat in my favorite lawn chair. "Walter, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said a long time ago." He sat down in the adjacent chair, his usual corporate confidence replaced by genuine sincerity. "I've been thinking about the man I was when I married Rebecca. I was humble then, grateful for any help, respectful of your experience and wisdom. Somewhere along the way, your generosity made me entitled instead of appreciative." I nodded, remembering that younger Brandon who had called me sir and meant it. "I want to apologize not just for taking your money, but for taking your dignity, for making you feel like an obligation instead of a choice, for treating your sacrifices like my rights." "Brandon, please let me finish. You gave us over $1 million, but more than that, you gave us 15 years of your retirement security. You gave up travel with Helen, hobbies you wanted to pursue, the lake house you talked about. You gave us the best years of your health and freedom." Tears gathered in his eyes, the first time I'd ever seen him cry. "I stole those years from you through my selfishness and pride. I can't give them back, but I can promise they won't be wasted. Rebecca and I are building something real now, something honest. The children are learning values that will serve them their entire lives. And you're learning that success isn't about what you can afford, but what you can sustain." "Exactly." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I'm not the same man who called you irrelevant at that dinner. That man was a fraud living on borrowed money and borrowed time. This man, the one sitting here today, he's poor, but he's real." We sat quietly for several minutes watching Jake and Sophia take turns on the tire swing. Their laughter was the sound of children who felt secure not because of material possessions, but because of parents who were finally mature enough to provide actual stability. "Walter," Brandon said finally, "I need to ask you something important." "What's that?" "Will you walk Sophia down the aisle someday if she asks? Not because you paid for the wedding, but because you earned the right through love and sacrifice." The question caught me off guard. I looked at my granddaughter, now 8 years old, spinning on the tire swing with pure joy. "If she asks me, I'd be honored." "And will you teach Jake about engineering and building things that last?" "I'd love nothing more." Brandon stood and extended his hand. "Thank you, Walter, for everything, but mostly for teaching us that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no." I shook his hand, feeling calluses that hadn't been there during his years of office-only work. He'd been doing home repair projects himself lately, learning skills he'd never needed when my money could hire professionals. "You're welcome, son." It was the first time I'd called him that since their wedding day. 2 years after the dinner that changed everything, I received a phone call that would test every lesson we'd learned. "Dad," Rebecca's voice was tight with worry. "Brandon's been offered a position in Seattle. It's a significant promotion, nearly double his current salary, but it would mean moving the family across the country." I set down my morning coffee and listened carefully. "The kids are established here, doing well in their schools and activities. Our mortgage is manageable, and we've built a nice life within our means. But this opportunity could change everything for us financially." "What does Brandon think?" "He's torn. The money would solve so many concerns: college funds for the kids, a chance to buy a larger house, financial security we've never had on our own. But he's also worried about uprooting everyone and starting over." "And what do you think?" A long pause. "Honestly, part of me is terrified that if we turn down this money, we'll regret it forever. And part of me is terrified that if we chase this money, we'll lose what we've finally built here." I could hear the growth in her thinking, considering not just the financial implications, but the human cost of major decisions. "Rebecca, let me ask you something. 2 years ago, would you have called to discuss this decision, or would you have simply expected me to make it possible for you to do whatever you wanted?" She was quiet for nearly a minute. "2 years ago, I would have expected you to solve the problem. If we wanted to move, you'd have covered moving expenses and helped with deposits. If we wanted to stay, you'd have supplemented Brandon's salary until he found something comparable here. And now? Now I'm calling because I value your wisdom, not your wallet. I want advice from someone who's lived long enough to understand that money can't buy happiness. But financial stress can certainly steal it." This was the conversation I'd waited 15 years to have with my daughter. "What does your budget tell you?" "Our current expenses are $4,200 monthly. Brandon's salary here is $5,800 after taxes. We're saving $1,600 monthly for emergencies and the kids' futures. It's not a lot, but it's sustainable and growing." "And Seattle?" "The salary would be $9,400 monthly after taxes, but housing costs are nearly double. A comparable house would cost $3,200 monthly instead of our current $1,850. Higher utilities, car registration, state taxes on Brandon's income that we don't pay here." I smiled, listening to her calculate real numbers instead of fantasizing about gross income. "So the net gain would be about $1,800 monthly. Significant but not life-changing. And that doesn't account for the cost of starting over. New schools for the kids, longer commutes, higher childcare costs if I can't immediately find work with similar flexibility." "It sounds like you've thought this through thoroughly." "I've learned to think things through, Dad. You taught me that math doesn't lie, even when emotions want to." "What do Jake and Sophia think?" "Jake's worried about leaving his friends and his baseball team. Sophia's scared about starting gymnastics somewhere new. But they're also excited about the possibility of adventure." "And what does your heart tell you?" Rebecca was quiet for so long I wondered if the call had dropped. My heart tells me that we're finally building something real here, not just financially, but as a family. Brandon and I are both growing in our careers without the pressure of maintaining a lifestyle we can't afford. The kids are learning values instead of entitlement. She paused again. My heart also tells me that running toward money, even good money for good reasons, feels familiar in an uncomfortable way. What do you mean? For 15 years we made every decision based on what we could afford if you covered the difference. We never learned to make decisions based on what we could actually handle. This feels similar, making a major life choice based on theoretical money instead of practical reality. I felt proud enough to burst. My daughter was finally thinking like an adult. Rebecca, what would you and Brandon decide if I weren't part of the equation at all? We'd probably stay. We'd continue building what we have here. Maybe explore Brandon getting additional certifications or training that could lead to promotions within his current company. We'd keep saving, keep the kids in their schools and activities, keep growing our emergency fund and college savings. That sounds like wisdom. But Dad, what if we're making a mistake? What if this opportunity never comes again? Rebecca, let me tell you something I learned too late in life. The opportunities that require you to abandon stability and chase money are rarely as good as they appear. The opportunities that grow from patience and steady progress, those tend to last. Is that why you stayed with the same engineering firm for 35 years, instead of jumping to different companies for higher salaries? Partly. But mostly because I learned that financial security comes from living below your means and building slowly, not from chasing the next big paycheck. That evening, Rebecca called back. Dad, Brandon and I talked for 3 hours. We're staying in Denver. We're going to focus on building wealth slowly through savings and smart decisions, rather than chasing income that comes with equally high expenses. I'm proud of both of you. We're proud of us too for the first time in a long time. And Rebecca, thank you for asking my advice instead of asking for my money. She laughed, the sound of someone who had learned to find joy in earned achievements rather than purchased pleasures. Dad, your advice is worth more than your money ever was. It just took me 15 years to figure that out. 3 years after the family intervention that saved us all, I found myself standing in front of 40 people in the community center's main conference room. Word had spread about my unconventional approach to family financial boundaries, and requests for seminars had grown beyond what I could handle individually. Good evening, everyone. My name is Walter Patterson, and I'm here to share what I learned from 15 years of financial enabling disguised as generosity. The audience was diverse, parents concerned about adult children, grandparents questioning their support levels, and young adults worried about accepting too much help from family. Show of hands, I began. How many of you are currently providing financial support to adult family members? Nearly 30 hands went up. Keep your hands up if you've been doing this for more than 2 years. 25 hands remained raised. Keep them up if the recipients of your support have never offered to pay you back or set a timeline for independence. 20 hands stayed up. And finally, keep your hands up if you feel taken for granted rather than appreciated. 18 hands remained raised, accompanied by uncomfortable shifting and quiet murmurs of recognition. Welcome to the club. I spent over $1 million in 15 years of my retirement learning what you're here to discover tonight, the difference between helping and enabling. I clicked to my first PowerPoint slide, showing a photo of Rebecca's family at last Christmas, genuinely happy, self-sufficient, and proud of their earned achievements. This is my daughter's family today. 3 years ago, they were facing foreclosure because I stopped paying their bills. The difference isn't the money I gave or didn't give. The difference is the respect we rebuilt once financial dependency ended. A woman in the front row raised her hand. Mr. Patterson, how do you know when help becomes harmful? Excellent question. Help becomes harmful when the recipient stops appreciating it and starts expecting it. When thank you becomes why can't you? When temporary becomes permanent without discussion or planning. I advanced to the next slide, showing my carefully maintained spreadsheet of 15 years of expenses. I documented every dollar because as an engineer, I believe in data. But the real damage wasn't financial, it was relational. By enabling their lifestyle, I was teaching my daughter and son-in-law that they didn't need to develop financial responsibility, work ethic, or gratitude. A middle-aged man near the back spoke up. But what if they really need the help? What if cutting them off causes genuine hardship? That's the hardest question, and it requires honest assessment. In my case, my daughter's family wasn't facing genuine hardship. They were facing the consequences of living beyond their means. There's a difference between someone who can't survive and someone who can't maintain their preferred lifestyle. I told them about Rebecca's grocery store job, Brandon's return to school, the children's adjustment to public school and community activities. They discovered they were stronger than they thought, but they could never discover that strength while I was providing an alternative to developing it. A grandmother in her 70s raised her hand. "Mr. Patterson, my grandson is 28 and still lives with us. He says he's saving money for his own place, but he spends money on entertainment and expensive clothes. We don't charge him rent because we want to help him get ahead." "How long has he been saving?" 4 years. "And how much has he saved?" I don't actually know." That's your answer right there. You don't know because he probably doesn't know. Comfort rarely motivates change. You're not helping him get ahead. You're helping him stay behind while feeling good about it. I spent the next hour sharing practical strategies, setting time limits on support, requiring detailed budgets from recipients distinguishing between emergencies and poor planning, and most importantly, learning to say no with love. The goal isn't to be cruel, I emphasized. The goal is to be truly helpful. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's weaknesses. During the question and answer period, a young woman asked, "What if cutting off support damages the relationship permanently?" If your relationship depends on your money rather than your love, it's already damaged. You're just revealing the damage rather than creating it. After the seminar, several people approached me with their stories. A father whose 40-year-old son had never held a job for more than 6 months. A mother whose daughter expected help with rent every month despite earning a good salary. Grandparents raising grandchildren because their adult children were finding themselves at age 35. Each story was different, but the pattern was identical. Good intentions leading to bad outcomes, generosity creating dependency, love being confused with enabling. I gave them all the same advice I'd learned the hard way. Set boundaries with love, enforce them with consistency, and trust that people are stronger than their comfort zones suggest. Driving home that night, I thought about Helen and how proud she would be of the family we'd become. Not because of the money I'd spent or saved, but because of the relationships we'd rebuilt on foundations of mutual respect rather than financial obligation. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Dad, Brandon just got promoted to regional manager. We're celebrating with homemade pizza and the cheapest champagne at the grocery store. It feels like we're millionaires because we earned it ourselves. Thank you for teaching us the difference." At 75, I was finally living the life Helen and I had planned. Traveling, pursuing hobbies, maintaining relationships based on choice rather than necessity. The consulting work had grown into something meaningful, helping families avoid the enabling trap that had consumed so many years of our lives. But most importantly, I was being the grandfather Jake and Sophia deserved. Someone who celebrated their achievements rather than funded their wants, who taught them values rather than buying them advantages. The phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Jake's voice bubbled with excitement. "Grandpa, I made the honor roll again, and I saved enough money to buy the bicycle I wanted. It's used, but it's perfect, and I bought it with money I earned from yard work and helping neighbors with their computers." "That's wonderful, Jake. How does it feel to buy something with your own money?" It feels like the bike is really mine, you know? Like I deserve to have it because I worked for it." "That's exactly right, buddy. That's exactly right." 5 years after the dinner that changed everything, I received news that would test the final lesson our family needed to learn. My doctor's voice was gentle but direct. "Walter, the tests confirm what we suspected. You have pancreatic cancer. It's advanced, but with treatment, you could have anywhere from 6 months to 2 years." I sat in the sterile office thinking not about myself, but about Helen's similar conversation 15 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just as I'd finally learned to live for myself, biology was imposing its own timeline. What are my options? Aggressive treatment might extend your life, but it would significantly impact your quality of life. Many patients in your situation choose to focus on comfort and time with family. I understand. I need to think about this. That evening, I sat in my study looking at the travel photos from the past 3 years. Scotland's misty highlands, Ireland's green hills, Norway's dramatic fjords. Adventures Helen and I had dreamed about, experiences I'd finally claimed for myself. On my desk sat the latest letter from Jake, now 13 and fascinated by engineering. He'd built a model bridge for his science fair project, incorporating principles I'd taught him during our Saturday afternoon workshops. Sophia, 11 now, had won a regional gymnastics competition and written me a thank you note for the hours I'd spent driving her to practices and meets. Time I gave freely because it was earned through her dedication, not purchased through my guilt. Rebecca and Brandon had surprised everyone, including themselves, by building genuine financial stability. Their modest ranch house was paid down significantly ahead of schedule. Both children had college funds growing through consistent monthly contributions from their parents' earned income. For their 10th wedding anniversary, they'd taken a weekend trip to Colorado Springs. Nothing extravagant but entirely self-funded and deeply appreciated. I picked up the phone and called Rebecca. "Dad, perfect timing. I just got home from work, and Brandon's making his famous spaghetti. Want to join us for dinner?" "Actually, sweetie, I need to talk to you and Brandon about something important. Could you come over here after dinner?" The tone of my voice must have conveyed the seriousness. "Is everything okay?" "We'll talk when you get here." They arrived at 8 p.m., bringing the children who immediately began showing me their latest school projects. Jake had designed a more efficient paper airplane using aerodynamic principles, while Sophia had choreographed a gymnastics routine to her favorite song. After the children were settled with homework at my kitchen table, I asked Rebecca and Brandon to join me in the living room. "I saw Dr. Martinez today about some tests he'd ordered." Rebecca's face went pale instantly. She'd been through this conversation before with Helen. "Dad, what did he say?" "I have pancreatic cancer, advanced stage, 6 months to 2 years depending on treatment choices." Brandon's face went gray. "Walter, I'm so sorry. What can we do? Do you need help with medical expenses? We could take out a loan." I held up my hand, touched by his immediate offer to sacrifice for me, a complete reversal from the man who'd once called me irrelevant. "Thank you, Brandon, but my insurance and savings will cover whatever I decide to do. Right now I need to think about treatment options and, more importantly, how to handle this news with Jake and Sophia." Rebecca was crying quietly, but her tears were different from the desperate sobs of 5 years ago. These were tears of genuine love rather than financial panic. "Dad, we want to help. Not with money, but with time, care, whatever you need." "I know you do, and that means everything to me." Brandon leaned forward. "What are you thinking about treatment?" "I'm 76 years old. I've lived a full life, traveled to places Helen and I dreamed about, seen you both become genuinely independent adults, and watched my grandchildren grow into remarkable young people. Quality of life matters more to me than quantity at this point." "So you're choosing comfort care?" "I'm choosing to live as fully as possible for whatever time I have left. Aggressive treatment would mean months in hospitals and clinics, feeling sick from chemotherapy, missing the good days for the promise of more days that might not be good." We talked until nearly midnight about practical matters. My will, which had been updated to reflect our new family dynamics, the house, my consulting business, and how to tell the children. "There's something else I need to discuss with both of you," I said as they prepared to leave. My will contains a provision I want you to understand. Rebecca tensed slightly, old habits dying hard. I'm leaving the house to both children equally, to be sold when they're 25, with proceeds going toward their education or first homes. My retirement accounts are also split between Jake and Sophia, managed in trust until they're 30. Dad, that's incredibly generous. But what about Rebecca and me? Brandon asked. I mean, we don't expect anything, but you're both getting something more valuable than money. You're getting the knowledge that you can stand on your own feet, that your children will inherit assets they can't access until they're mature enough to handle them responsibly. And most importantly, you're getting a family legacy built on values rather than entitlement. Rebecca wiped her eyes. It's perfect, Dad. It's exactly what we all need. The next morning, I called Jake and Sophia into my study. At 13 and 11, they were old enough for honest conversation. Kids, I need to tell you something important about my health. They sat side by side on my old couch, sensing the gravity of the moment. Grandpa is sick. I have cancer, which means my body isn't working the way it should. Sophia's eyes filled with tears immediately. Are you going to die like Grandma Helen? Eventually, yes, but not right away. The doctors think I have many months, maybe even a couple of years to spend with people I love. Jake, ever practical, asked, Will you be in pain? Will you have to go to the hospital? I might have some discomfort, but I'll take medicine to help with that. And I plan to stay home as much as possible, doing the things I enjoy with the people I love. What can we do to help? Sophia asked, her voice small but determined. Keep being yourselves. Keep working hard in school, playing your sports, growing into the amazing people you're becoming. Keep visiting me, showing me your projects, telling me about your friends and adventures. Will you still be able to help me with my engineering projects? Jake asked. For as long as I'm able, absolutely. In fact, I'd like to work on something special with both of you. A project we can build together that will last long after I'm gone. Over the following weeks, we designed and began building a wooden playground structure for the elementary school both children had attended. Jake applied engineering principles to ensure structural soundness, while Sophia contributed creative design elements that would make the playground both functional and beautiful. The project gave us purpose during a difficult time and created something tangible that would serve other children for years to come. More importantly, it taught Jake and Sophia that the best legacy isn't money. It's the positive impact you make on others' lives. Rebecca and Brandon handled the news with remarkable maturity. Instead of falling apart or making my illness about their own fears, they stepped up in ways that would have been impossible during their years of financial dependency. Rebecca arranged her work schedule to drive me to medical appointments. Brandon used his vacation time to help with the playground project, learning basic carpentry skills alongside his son. Both of them demonstrated the kind of emotional strength that comes only from having survived real challenges and emerged stronger. 3 months after my diagnosis, we held a community dedication ceremony for the completed playground. Jake spoke about engineering principles and safety features, while Sophia performed a gymnastics routine on the new equipment. The local newspaper ran a story about 3 generations working together to create something lasting for their community. Standing in the autumn sunshine, watching children already enjoying the swings and climbing structures we'd built, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from meaningful work shared with people you love. Dr. Martinez had been right about the timeline. I could feel my energy waning, but every day still held moments of joy. Jake's excitement about a new math concept, Sophia's progress in gymnastics, Rebecca's stories about her promotion to store manager, Brandon's completion of his MBA program. That evening, as I reviewed the family photos covering my mantle, I realized Helen would be proud of what we'd accomplished. Not the money saved or spent, but the relationships rebuilt on foundations of truth and mutual respect. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Dad, thank you for teaching us that love isn't measured in dollars but in the courage to do what's right even when it's hard. We love you. At 76, facing my final months, I was surrounded by a family that had learned to love genuinely rather than transactionally. The dinner that had seemed like an ending 5 years ago had actually been our beginning. 6 months later, Rebecca stood at the podium in the same community center where I'd given my first financial boundary seminar, looking out at an audience of nearly 200 people. Her voice was steady, though her eyes showed the recent grief of losing a father who had become a true friend in his final years. Good evening. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and I'm here tonight to continue the work my father, Walter Patterson, began 3 years ago, teaching families the difference between helping and enabling. She clicked to her first slide, showing a photo of our family from last Christmas. All of us gathered around the modest Christmas tree in her living room, faces glowing with genuine contentment rather than artificial abundance. 5 years ago, my family lived a lie funded by my father's generosity. We spent over $1 million of his retirement money while pretending our lifestyle was self-made. We took his sacrifices for granted and treated his love like an obligation. The audience was completely silent, recognizing the courage required for such public honesty. Then, during a family dinner, my husband made a terrible mistake. He asked my father what it felt like to be irrelevant. Dad's response changed all our lives. How does it feel to know this irrelevant man will no longer be financing your delusions? She advanced to the next slide, showing our family's financial recovery timeline, the foreclosure threat, the job search, the lifestyle downsizing, and ultimately, the genuine stability built through their own efforts. My father didn't abandon us when he cut off financial support. He saved us. He taught us that real love sometimes means refusing to enable someone's weaknesses. Jake, now 14 and sitting in the front row, raised his hand. Rebecca smiled and nodded. Mom, can I tell them about the playground? Of course, honey. Jake stood with the confidence of a young man who had learned to earn respect rather than expect it. My grandpa spent his last year teaching my sister and me how to build something that would help other people. We designed and constructed a playground for our old elementary school. Grandpa said the best inheritance isn't money you didn't earn, but skills you can use to make the world better. Sophia, 12 now and captain of her middle school gymnastics team, added, Grandpa taught us that feeling proud of yourself comes from working hard, not from having expensive things. Rebecca's voice carried the strength of someone who had survived genuine transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, my father left Jake and Sophia a substantial inheritance, but they can't access it until they're mature enough to handle it responsibly. In the meantime, they're learning the values that will make them worthy of that gift. She told them about Brandon's MBA graduation, her own promotion to regional manager at a grocery chain, their mortgage being paid ahead of schedule, and college funds growing through consistent monthly contributions from earned income. We're not wealthy, but we're stable. We're not impressive, but we're honest. And for the first time in our adult lives, we're proud of what we've built because we built it ourselves. After the presentation, a woman approached Rebecca with tears in her eyes. My son is 35 and has never paid rent. He says he's saving money, but he spends hundreds on video games and takeout food. I've been supporting him for 8 years because I'm afraid he'll end up homeless. Rebecca's response carried the wisdom of hard-earned experience. Ma'am, your son isn't afraid of being homeless. He's afraid of being responsible. And as long as you provide an alternative to responsibility, he'll never develop it. But what if he really does end up on the streets? Then he'll discover he's stronger than he thinks, the same way my family did. Later that evening, Rebecca and Brandon sat in their small but comfortable living room, reviewing the positive feedback from the seminar. Your dad would be proud of tonight, Brandon said, reading thank you emails from attendees. He'd be proud of us, Rebecca corrected. Not for the presentation, but for becoming people who can help others instead of needing help ourselves. Jake looked up from his homework. Mom, Mrs. Peterson asked if I could tutor her grandson in math. He's struggling with fractions. That's wonderful, honey. What did you tell her? I said yes, but I want to do it for free. Grandpa always said the best way to honor help you've received is to help someone else. Sophia bounced on the couch beside her brother. And I'm going to teach beginning gymnastics at the community center this summer. Coach Martinez said I'm ready to be an assistant instructor. Brandon looked at his children with amazement. You know what's incredible? 2 years ago you were both in expensive private programs. Now you're offering to teach other kids in community programs. It's better this way, Jake said matter-of-factly. When you earn something, you want to share it. When someone just gives it to you, you want to keep it all for yourself. Rebecca and Brandon exchanged a look of parental pride mixed with painful recognition of their former selves. Kids, Rebecca said gently, what would you say to families who are struggling with the same problems we used to have? Sophia considered this seriously. I'd tell them that having less stuff but more honesty feels way better than having lots of stuff but feeling bad about how you got it. Jake nodded. And I'd tell them that working hard for something makes you appreciate it more. Like my bike. I still love it because I remember every lawn I mowed to buy it. As the evening wound down and the children headed to bed, Rebecca stood at her kitchen window, looking toward the house where I'd lived. New owners had moved in, a young couple with small children who waved when they saw her in the yard. Do you ever regret how things happened? Brandon asked, joining her at the window. You mean, do I regret Dad cutting us off? Yeah. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, considering the question that had haunted her for 5 years. I regret that it took so long for us to learn what he was trying to teach us. I regret the years he spent sacrificing his own dreams for our selfishness. I regret that he had to choose between helping us and saving himself. She turned to face her husband. But I don't regret where we ended up. We're better people now, better parents, better examples for Jake and Sophia. Do you think we would have learned these lessons eventually without the financial crisis? Honestly? No. We were too comfortable being uncomfortable with taking his money. We needed the crisis to force growth. Brandon nodded. Sometimes I wonder what kind of man I'd be today if your father had kept paying our bills. You'd probably still be the entitled guy who called him irrelevant at dinner. God, I can't believe I said that. But you did, and he responded with exactly the tough love we needed to hear. They stood together in the quiet of their modest home, surrounded by furniture they'd chosen carefully within their budget, breathing air that smelled of tonight's homemade dinner rather than expensive takeout, listening to the sounds of children who felt secure because their parents had finally learned to provide actual stability. In the distance, a church bell chimed 9 o'clock. Somewhere across town, another family was probably having the same financial arguments Rebecca and Brandon had once had nightly. Somewhere else, grandparents were probably funding adult children's lifestyles while wondering why gratitude had turned to entitlement. But in this small ranch house on Elm Street, 4 people slept peacefully, knowing they had earned their rest through honest work and genuine effort. Walter Patterson's greatest achievement hadn't been the bridges and highways he'd engineered during his career. It hadn't been the $1 million he'd spent supporting his family during their years of need. His greatest achievement had been the courage to say no when saying yes would have been easier. The courage to teach independence instead of enabling dependence. The courage to choose long-term love over short-term comfort. 5 years after the dinner that changed everything, his legacy lived on in a family that had learned the difference between supporting and enabling, between love and enabling, between giving and growing. And in community centers across Denver, his daughter continued teaching other families the most important lesson Walter Patterson had ever learned. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to make someone else's poor choices easy to maintain. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to discover their own strength. Sometimes saying no is the highest form of saying yes to someone's potential. The dinner conversation that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning. The beginning of a family built on truth instead of transactions, respect instead of entitlement, and love instead of obligation. Walter Patterson had spent 40 years engineering structures that would stand the test of time. But his masterpiece was engineering a family that would honor his memory not through financial inheritance but through the values he'd finally found the courage to teach. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to set tough boundaries with family members? How did you find the courage to choose long-term love over short-term comfort? Your engagement helps us continue bringing you stories that matter. For more transformative family stories, click on the suggested videos appearing on your screen now. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no.